Hi, I'm Paul Winn. Welcome to Head On. Tonight we have a very, very interesting subject about the Canada Pension Plan, and it'll be really important for those people who are in their teens today, and maybe some in their 30s and 40s. But we have with us a specialist. I was going to say expert, but I'll say specialist, Emeka Udeagha, who is a finance man, and me, I don't have that skill. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah. So, pensions. Okay, now let's imagine I'm say 17, 18-year-old at this point in time, and I happen to be in the workforce as opposed to being in school at this stage. How is that going to work for me, the Canada Pension Plan?
Well, things have sort of changed over the years. So I'd start by just giving you a brief illustration.
Sure.
If you went as far back as 1971, okay, you're looking at Canadian men who were in the workforce. About 48% actually had defined benefit plan. When I say defined benefit plan, I mean they actually had pension through work. Okay. That number has actually dropped by 25% in the last 45 years. So what the government is trying to do now, especially now with the enhanced CPP, is to create an additional forced savings plan, especially for the younger generations, because majority of the changes that are actually happening right now are not going to be seen for another few years. Right. They're not actually going to be implemented for another few years, and the effect won't actually be seen for another few years down the road. So it's more for the younger generation just to sort of replace the lack of not having that company pension plan that many of our parents did have back when they were in their working days.
Yeah, because the stuff that I've sort of was reading is, as you pointed out, I think it starts in 2019, and then over the 7 years it starts to get rolled in, and so by 2025 it becomes a reality for some people.
Well, the way the government likes to do things is, I mean, in as much as they make these changes on the whim, they always try to give the public a timeline just to adjust and be ready for the changes that are going to happen. So the premiums, currently the way it stands right now, for every dollar you make, you contribute 4.95% of that to your CPP. As an employee, you contribute 4.95%, and as an employer, you also contribute 4.95%. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is, starting from 2019, they're going to start increasing the premiums to the CPP to match the enhanced changes that are going to be implemented down the road. So it's going to actually cost employers and employees roughly around $7 when it gets launched in 2019. And that's going to be, over the next 7 years, it's going to go up to roughly around $34. That's what's going to cost the employers and employees. So they're trying to make it a gradual change. That way, it's not, people are not felt or people are not hit with a huge dent in their wallets just by trying to match up to the changes.
Has this been initiated because there's been a lot of talk about how current seniors are suffering because of they didn't save for retirement, or there wasn't the plan wasn't rich enough to give them a decent quality of life. Is that you think a reality?
Well, the reason why the CPP was implemented, and just like any other retirement vehicle, is not for you to have all your eggs in one basket. So the CPP is pretty much supposed to just supplement your other retirement accounts. Now, again, like I said, back in the day, you had people who were working for companies where they were going to have their pension plans from work. Yes. They're going to have their CPP and their OAS in addition to whatever other savings they might have planned. Now that's changing because now people are working for companies that don't issue those pension plans anymore. So you're having a case where people just have to rely on CPP and OAS and whatever actually they're able to save, which is not necessarily always the case. People always start saving late for retirement. So that pot is not always as robust. So what happens is over the long term, you find people who get themselves in a situation where the only two avenues they have are the government benefits, which is your CPP and your OAS, which is not always enough for people to live in retirement. So that is one of the factors that has actually led to the growing population of seniors who are actually almost at that poverty threshold.
Well, there's also the sort of an argument that some people feel they'd be better off contributing to RRSP or to was a tax-free saving plan might be more beneficial. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, just like I said earlier, it's never always one or the other.
Yeah.
For me, it's not this or this. It should be this and this. So in as much as you have your CPP going for you, in as much as you might have a pension through work, you want to still have something in your RSPs. You want to still have something in your TFSAs. You want to have those multiple streams of income, right? So just as we're having these changes happening right now, we never know what's going to happen, especially with government programs. So it's always wise for you to always maximize all the savings opportunity you have out there. I mean, there's quite a number of saving avenues that Canadians can definitely utilize.
Because feeling that it could affect the economy. If people don't have as much disposable income because it's going into these futuristic plans, for when they retire, they don't have the disposable income, so that's going to affect businesses because people aren't going to be out there shopping, maybe going out for entertainment or meals and that. Do you see that as a concern?
That is one argument that has come up. I mean, right now, the way Stats looks at the average Canadian, for every dollar a Canadian makes, they're $1.6 in debt. Okay. So there's enough financial hardship on the economy as a whole. I mean, look at what's happening in the real estate market. People are finding it difficult to actually get in to the real estate market. Those who actually manage to get in are actually trying to pay off whatever mortgage they were able to, they were approved for in the first place. So, you have people who spend their 20s and their 30s trying to pay off mortgages or trying to pay off the debt. And then they get to the point where they're in their 40s, late 40s and 50s, and now the debt is paid for, and now they want to start saving for retirement. So it's always, it's usually very, always trying to find the right balance between CPP and the OAS and your RSPs and your TFSAs, and just make sure you utilize all the various streams of savings that you have.
Because I was thinking about Nanaimo, and I was thinking that what is it going to be like, say, 40 years down the road, if it maintains itself as a retirement community? You know what I mean? Like, I wonder how that's going to, is it going to change the way Nanaimo looks, because all these people, are they going to have more disposable income when they're retired, or is it going to be, are they going to be even worse off than we think?
Well, the way it is right now, in the next few years, we're going to have a huge flow of money. Money is going to change hands. From right now, we have a huge seniors demographic. A lot of that is going to shift hands to the next generation. So again, looking at where we are, the part of Canada where we live in Nanaimo, it's such a beautiful place. We would always have that influx of people always wanting to retire here because the weather is good here. Climate is good. Real estate can be affordable, especially for seniors, because they have the capital, they have the income. So, for Nanaimo as a whole, I would imagine in the next few years, you'd still see that influx of retirees coming in. Again, just because of the way things are structured here in terms of the weather and housing market as well.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I was, trying to imagine, the futuristic community, because that's something that you do notice, as you say, about the demographics of Nanaimo does have a fairly high, retirement element in it, and which is good. I mean, I'm not knocking that, but I notice a lot of the seniors are still working. They're supplementing whatever income they have by getting jobs, and I don't know, that's probably going to be the same thing.
Well, and for me, that's one of the benefits, I think, the enhanced CPP changes will bring to the table, because one of the main problems we have right now with the senior community is the fact that most of them outlive their money. Okay. Things have changed back then. Back in the day, the retirement age was 65.
Yes.
Life expectancy again was 70, right? People didn't always live as long. Now we're seeing that change. Now people are actually retiring earlier than 65. People are retiring at 50, at 55, at 60, and people are actually living longer.
Yes.
So there's the problem of people actually outliving their money. One of the main problems most seniors have is, well, now I'm 65, now I'm retired, now I have $500,000 in the bank, but how do I know how much to take out every month in order for this to last me? So looking at the benefits of the CPP, you don't have that worry if you're collecting CPP.
Right.
If you live to your 200 years old, you're going to be collecting your CPP pension to your 200 years old. So again, that's where you want to have the balance. Where you always want to make sure, you're. I mean, and I've seen this in most of my clients' cases where your government benefits and your fixed income coming in from your pensions pretty much supplement your expenses, your lifestyle. Right. The additional lifestyle expenses you want to do by choice, you can supplement that from your retirement savings and your TFSAs and your RSPs.
So it would benefit the young people coming along with going to be part of this plan, or anybody, I guess, even if they're still in the workforce, to save additional money into, say, like I mentioned the RSPs and the tax-free savings. Then it's going to be really beneficial for them to think that way and to do it, so that if they decide they want to take a cruise, they might be able to afford that. Because if they're living off their fixed pensions, that there's nothing extra to do that stuff.
But then again, it's having the balance, because with your RSPs and with your TFSAs, majority of the time, you have to deal with the investment decisions you take on those accounts.
Right.
Whereas, again, if you had a defined benefit pension plan or with a CPP, the worries about how you invest the money is not going to be there, because that's something where you have the contribution taken off your paycheck, you're paying into CPP. You don't care what happens with investments. That's done at the back end, right? You don't have to worry. Whereas if you had your RSP, you had your TFSA, in most cases, you might be working with an advisor, but you would have to make certain decisions as to how that would be invested, or how long that would be invested for, or what you invested in. So again, it's going back to my previous point. It's all about just having the balance. Having the balance between there's a lot of saving avenues and retirement vehicles people can utilize. So it's having a balance between all of them.
It's got to be extremely difficult in this sense of, well, I think I'll live to be 100. And I'll say, okay, but I might be gone tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, if I had a plan to, but usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
It's just that you think that you got enough money to live to 100, and you only have enough to live to 75 or something, and then you run out of money, but you're still
alive.
Here,
Exactly.
and then you got a real problem that way.
So, again, there's always two sides to the story. There's people who say, well, just like your pension, if you had pension through work, well, if you decide to allow your company to pay you the pension, they're in control. So the way it works is if you live till you're 200 years old, you're still going to get your pension, right? If you die, in some cases you can have a survivor benefit. Your wife will get probably 60% of your pension. Yeah. If your wife dies, that's it.
Yes.
Even if you had $1 million in the pot at the time you were collecting the pension, that's it, right? If you had your own personal, say your RSP or TFSA, even though you have control of the money, and so you pass away, your wife can still withdraw exactly the same amount of money as you were collecting. If your wife passes away, you have that money available to your estate, as opposed to if you had a pension where if both of you pass, well, it's, a chunk of it is gone. You still have to worry about the fact that you would have to make decisions on those accounts. Whereas in the pension plan, the CPP, and if you had your defined benefit pension plan, as much as, if you and the wife pass, you might not see a substantial amount going to your estate to be passed on to your kids. Yeah. You can be sure that in your case, if you thought you were going to live to 75 and you lived to your 200 years old, you were going to get all that pension every month to your 200 years old. So again, there's always two sides of the story, and that's why I always emphasize on having a balance of both. You know, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So if you have a mixture of both avenues where you're still getting your fixed income, so every month you're getting your money from the CPP, from OAS, for if you had pension through work, you're getting all that money. So that's fixed. Okay. If you live till you're 500 years old, you still get that amount. Right. Then you have the one that you have control over, your TFSA, your RSPs, whatever other, your non-registered accounts.
So you could invest or make investment decisions on that to increase the amount.
Exactly. But then again, if you don't spend wisely, you can run out of money quicker, right?
You make a bad decision.
Exactly. You can run out of money. So again, so there's always two sides. There's always two sides to the story.
I mean, I think I understand the thinking behind the politicians, you know, of why they're doing this, because they're trying to give people, I guess, some kind of comfort. Yes. In their old age, you know, like saying, am I going to be eating dog food, and will I be able to buy, you know, nourishment? Because one of the things that also seems to come with age is medical concerns, you know.
Your expenses go up the roof.
Yeah, so suddenly, if you say, well, I never really planned for that. Like, I mean, I never expected to have a heart attack or a stroke or have a hip replacement. You know, I mean, and those are just realities of things that happen. And then in some cases, it requires long-term, prescriptions. Like, you know, you have to every month or so you have to refill your prescription. That's, while we have good plans in place, it still is coming out of that cash or money you had, and maybe you weren't counting on having to spend. Well, so that's just for argument's sake, $50 a month I have to spend on renewing my prescriptions. You know, like that was an expense I didn't think of. I think it was $50 I could use to go to the movies every week or something. You know, I mean, yeah. I don't know. You know, when we have these provinces, there's two that I think that don't have opting into the CPP because they have their own pension.
Well, not they haven't actually agreed to sign. So usually before any of these changes are made, you need to, of course, get approval from Ottawa, and 7 out of the 10 provinces, which represent 2/3 of the population, actually have to be in agreement before changes like this can be made. So at the time, as of yesterday, when the meeting was held in Vancouver, 8 out of 10 provinces had actually agreed to sign the agreement. So it was just Quebec and Manitoba that haven't signed. And that's understandable. Manitoba, they just basically had a new government come in. So I guess, you know, they're still, what's being said is they're still trying to digest the changes and make sure it's right for their citizens as well. But
because I thought Saskatchewan and Quebec had their pension plan.
Well, they have their own.
Their own.
And that works like the RSP. So it's more like a voluntary, voluntary.
It's a voluntary thing, not a mandatory kind of deductions, because it's. You know, I guess, you know, spending money is a concern. Everybody has that.
It is. I mean, it's especially the way, you know, the rate of inflation right now is actually dramatically going up. You know, right now housing prices are going up, food prices are going up, everything is just going up. So standard of living is going up, right? And you have cases where, you know, people have not always had those multiple streams of income in retirement. You know, they were, you know, it was very easy back then to say, well, you know, I'm really not going to save anything now because I know I'm working for a company and I get out of in retirement, I'm going to get my pension, my CVP, and all that stuff. But that's all that's changed. You know, right now you can actually come out in retirement and realize that you just have your CVP and OAS.
Yeah, because you know, it's you know, thinking if you didn't own your own home at that stage, you know, at that point in time, then you're renting, you know, and that could fluctuate like crazy. I mean, in terms of how you want to live. But if you own your own home and you've, you know, sort of at the tail end of paying off your mortgage or have, you know, paid it off, but it's if you're working on that tail end. You still have to worry about maintenance of that place, and this is the thing about the money. You know, like, you know, this is only one aspect. It's great to have the CPP, but it's not going to cover everything. You know, it's not going to be that. You know, not going to, if you have a problem with your house, you need a new roof, or a leak and the plumbing damages your property or something like that. You know, all these extra things that people hope that it doesn't happen to them. You know, because nobody wants bad luck. But if bad luck comes your way, you're then you say, well, how do I deal with this? I guess you could always go to your friendly bank and get a loan for whatever, and of course you could use your house as equity to get the loan.
The moral of the story basically is just starting early. So if you start planning from before you retire, because that's one problem that most people seem to have, where throughout their working years it's always about paying debt and taking the kids to school and doing every other thing except saving for retirement. When we're done paying our mortgage, then we can start saving. So if you come up with that kind of mentality, it makes things difficult for you down the road, right? But if you, even way before you retire, figure out, well, this is how much I need. So I'm 30 years old. Right now, my standard of living, I need $3,000 a month for my expenses. Right. Well, I think based on what I have right now and how I'm living right now, the mortgage will be paid up, the kids will be out of the house. I probably will need $2,000 a month in retirement at 65. Yeah. Well, now we ask ourselves the question, we work our way backwards and say, well, how much do we need to have at 65 to spit out $2,000 a month? Assuming life expectancy is still age 90. Right. How much do we need to have in the pot at 65 to be able to spit out $2,000 a month? And then we work our way backwards, right? And then, well, if we know how much we need to have at 65, now we're 30, how much do we need to save now to get to that point at 65? Now, that's just one piece of the puzzle. So that's saving for retirement and making sure you have a plan to save for retirement. You always want to make sure you have an emergency fund, right? So it's all good and dandy that we want to save $5 a month or $50 a month or $100 a month. Yeah. But what happens if you get hit by a bus?
Yes.
Right? How's that going to derail your retirement plan? So you want to make sure you plan for all those contingencies. As much as we don't like to admit the fact that something will happen to us, it's always good to have that plan B. Where if you have your emergency fund and it's doing its thing, you're not going to touch it. Yeah. If you're in retirement and you retire and you have those emergencies or medications or your roof blows, you don't have to dip into your RSPs to fix your roof. Right? Because you have your emergency pot. So it's all about proper planning. If you plan ahead, you plan properly, you plan the right way, you know what your numbers are. That's a key question I was asked.
And I think that's you're just. I mean, that's important, right? Like, I mean, a young person today would be wise to sit down and think about what you just talked about. Mm-hmm. Okay, at 65, what am I going to need to live? And then, like you say, you work backwards.
Back.
And
I always ask, what's your number?
Yeah,
it's a very it's one question people don't ask. Usually when I do ask, people always take a step back to actually think, because they realize, well, I actually haven't thought about what my number is. Yeah. Right. So. I
mean, I couldn't tell you my number if you asked me. I mean, but I never went through this exercise. Yeah. Like I didn't go through that exercise. I mean, because I didn't have to retire at 65. I mean, I could keep working, and then finally I decided I would stop working. I hated getting up early in the morning and having to, go to someplace. Now I can sit and read or have a coffee for 3 hours if I want.
Well, I mean, the definition of work has actually changed. Yeah. So, back then, work is going to the office, being there 9 to 5. Well, I would disagree to that definition right now completely. Because right now there's people who work from home. Yes, there's people who blog, and that's actually a full-time job. They make a decent living from that. There's people who travel for work. Yeah. They travel around, and so the whole notion of going to work, working 9 to 5, coming back, retire at 65, all that's changed. Now people are trying to be more adventurous with what they do for work, just because they want to be able to retire early.
Yeah.
There's a lot more business owners right now this year than they were 10 years ago, because people are trying to get into that mindset of being their own boss and taking responsibility when they retire. Now that's another problem that follows with that decision, where you have a lot of people who are trying to be business owners, right, to give themselves that financial freedom and that freedom to do whatever they want.
Sure.
But then they don't realize the implication and the responsibility that comes to being a business owner. So if I was working for TELUS, or if I was working for Shaw, if I was working for one of the banks or a mining company, I know I work for X amount of years. When I work for X amount of years, if they had a pension, I'm contributing for X amount of years. When I retire, I'm going to get my pension. Yeah. Same thing with your CPP. With a business owner, or as a business owner, you are responsible for your own pension. You are responsible for all those decisions that your employer would have made for you, right? So, again, that's where you have, again, there's always two sides to the story. This is the part where people don't actually think about when they become business owners. Everyone just wants the financial freedom and the fact that I'm going to be able to do what I want and work how I want and work how many hours I want to in a day, but you don't realize about the implication. How am I going to sell my business? People. It's always quick for us to want to get into a business, but you've worked in this business for 30 years. How do you unlock the value in your business? Yeah. And if you want to retire tomorrow, what's going to happen? Do you have a succession planning in place? So these are questions we don't often ask ourselves. No. Again, so I would go back to the argument, looking at the CPP and with the changes coming up. I think this is going to help buffer some of those problems. Where if you're a business owner and you get your pension, or you're a business owner and you retire at 65, you can be guaranteed, or you can be sure that even if you did nothing, even if you were not financially responsible as a business owner or as an employer, if you want to call it, you still have something coming from the CPP.
That's important what you said. We've got about 45 seconds left here, and I was thinking a couple of important things from my perspective that people should think about is that looking forward and backwards, in terms of planning what they might need and how you would get it. Because I noticed that a lot of seniors are working still. Yes. They may have had another job, but when I go into our supermarkets and whatnot, I see a lot of elderly people still employed. But I think getting somebody to sit down and look at your number and deal with it, I think, is really going to be super, super important. And it might save a lot of heartache down the road.
It will. It will. If you start early, it just makes life easy for you, because it's all about knowing your point A, which is where you are, knowing your point B, which is your destination, and just drawing a path. You know where you're going, so it makes the journey a lot easier if you know where you're going.
Yeah. No, that's great. Listen, this has been really interesting. I wish I was a young person just starting out instead of a relatively young person finishing off. I think it's important, but it's true. I've already lived longer than I ever thought I would. So and that's because I was a naughty kid.
That could be a good thing.
Anyhow, but thanks very much for this, and I really appreciate all the information you've given. And if people want to contact you, there's a name and a number and a website, I think, on television, so they can give a shout to you, and maybe you could help them get their numbers.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks very much. And you folks, if you've got any suggestions or ideas for a show, let's get in touch with Melissa Hall. You'll see her number, it should be on the bottom of the screen at some time. Give us a call. We'll be glad to talk to you about it. Thanks for looking in.